into the book of James right away. I'll only keep you for 2 hours tonight, not like the 3 hours last night. I think everybody was here except for one. It was about an hour and 20 minutes. Well, hour and 15 anyway. It was a long one, and probably not quite that long tonight. Hopefully we'll get out of here. So, you know, there's so much that we can say on James. There's so many things that we could mention by way of review to catch us up and get us ready for the portion that we're going to be in tonight. But I think we'll do the least possible review to give more time for our text. So, you know, in terms of review of this sermon, let's remember that James is talking about living a life that is, we'll use the Greek word teleios. So I was actually studying that afresh today, just going through all the mentions of that word in James, and it's powerful. So I'm not going to talk about that. Okay, I mean there's some things that I haven't mentioned that we could talk about, but let's not go there. In essence, though, teleios is really asking, what is the condition of our souls? What is your soul like? Is it healthy? If the soul is healthy, then it is teleios, meaning it is whole. It is devoted entirely to God, the love of God, James chapter 1, verse 12, and the love of our neighbor, James chapter 2, verse 8. To have a teleios soul is to be at rest inside. It's to be peaceful, even when the circumstances around us would have us any other way than that. Even when the circumstances, are just pulsating around us and trying to, drag us down and make us like that wave of the sea driven and tossed by the wind, frothing and messed up inside. That's the mark of an immature soul, a non-teleios soul. The way James defines that, that's a double-souled or a double-minded person. Now, last night, we were in James chapter 4. I want to take us back briefly to that, to verse 8, where James says it like this: "Cleanse your hands, ye sinners, and purify your hearts, ye double-minded." Purify your heart. And that is, heart there is cardia. Cardio, vascular, the lungs. Okay, so here's that cardio. Purify the heart. If our hearts are not pure, then what are we? We are double-minded. What is James saying here when he says purify the heart? Purify is an imperative in the original language, meaning it's a command. This is something we do. It's something we are an active part of. We can't do it without grace, but we are still actively involved in the process of purification by way of studying the word and allowing it to wash our souls. Okay, so cleanse your hands, purify your hearts. Otherwise, what will be true will still remain double-minded and will be like a wave of the sea, often inside. And we don't want that. I don't want that. I do not want to live like that. I've lived like that for so many years, and I still struggle. We all are going to always have a little bit of that. But where I am now versus where I used to be 30 years ago, no comparison. It's so much better to love God and to love others than it is to love myself. It's so much better. I mean, it just inside, internally, it's like, yes, Lord, please help me to be like this more by grace. Now, that's what this chapter, the chapter 3, verses 1 through 12 is all about. It's about the soul. Now, you're going to know it in a different way. We're going to know it as the portion of James that talks about the tongue. That's how we know it. James chapter 3 verses 1 through 12 are all about the tongue. But I want us to focus really carefully when we get there on the last 4 verses, because what are those 4 verses talking about? The source of things. And so what is the source of the tongue? We'll find this out as we develop it, but I'll say it up front. The source of the tongue is the soul. So if our soul is teleos, then what's going to come out of our mouths in terms of our speech is going to be sweet. Look down at James chapter 3, verse 11. Doth a fountain send forth from the same place sweet water and bitter? Of course, the answer is no. That word sweet is glucose. Okay, sugar. That's literally glucose is the Greek word there. So, all right. How does sweet speech, what produces sweet speech? A soul that is sweet. A soul that is healthy. A soul that is not sick. A soul that's not kind of dark. A soul that isn't embittered. A soul that, those things are what mess up the soul. Those things are what keep us from being shalom, a deep sense of peace. This is reality. We can have that kind of peace. This isn't just one of those highfalutin ideas that, we'd love to really be able to get, but we can't attain. No, absolutely. This is the goal of the New Testament, is to bring us to a point where Colossians 1:28, it's at the bottom of your handout, where we're presenting everyone Teleios in Christ, complete in Christ, perfect in Christ, whole in Christ. And this is quite possible. It's very real. Doesn't mean that everyone's going to be that. In fact, I'm going to argue that, having been to so many churches, having been a pastor of 3 different churches, I hope this isn't meant to be a harsh comment, but I would say that easily well over half of each of the congregations that I've served are very far from Teleios. The believers are critical spirited, kind of harsh. You look at and you're like, man, and you preach your heart out and you really want to see them grow, and there's some growth, but sometimes not so much. Maybe I'll share some illustrations. I'll do it carefully and never name a name, but it breaks your heart as the shepherd. I mean, you want the people growing, it just doesn't always happen. So a believer can regularly speak sweet words, and when they do, that means their soul inside is really sweet. In other words, they're teleos. Those words are coming from a soul that is telos. Now, there's another possibility. Same verse. Doth a fountain send forth at the same place?
Jim, listen to church tonight.
And bitter? Of course, again, the answer is no. It doesn't do both. But this is yet reality for all of us at times, some of us much more of the time, when our words are bitter. And that doesn't, not just in only this pure sense of bitterness, but just in the sense of not healthy words, speech. So if you know of a Christian whose speech is not healthy often, this is what James is talking about, and what he is encouraging that individual to do is to go deeply into the Word and let that Word cleanse their soul. And it doesn't happen like that. It takes years, months, years for that soul to be progressively cleansed by the Word. But it does happen. It is a real thing. And so it is possible for Christians. In fact, it's not just possible. We all know Christians who look a lot more like the bitter kind of speech, and then others who are a lot more, almost always. I don't say always because I don't know if I know anyone. I know a couple people probably pretty close to always having sweet speech, but I don't know if I know anyone who, if I've known them long enough, who's just never said anything amiss. All right, now, that's kind of the background. I jumped down near the end of the chapter because if we don't understand that idea of the source of the tongue, then I feel like we're going to be partially wasting our time by starting without more explanation. So, what is James talking about here regarding the tongue? More specifically, what is his purpose in talking about speech? You see it on your handout. The goal of discipleship is to so cleanse the soul that our words are pure. So often a believer will read this chapter and chide themselves about their speech and say something like this: I just need to do better about my speech. Well, did anyone ever do this in their home? When I was a kid, my parents did it for a very short time. Every time I wasn't saying any like harsh curse words, but like every time we used the Lord's, I came from a Catholic home, okay? So, and anytime we used the Lord's name in vain, or if my parents said anything worse than that, all of us had to put a nickel in a jar. And that jar was full so fast, they just quit doing it. I mean, it's just like, okay. Why? Well, the idea of controlling the tongue, like, that's the wrong target. It's not the tongue that's really the problem, it's the soul that's the problem. So if we're just like, yeah, okay, I'm going to memorize 3 verses on speech and just keep telling myself, don't say any bad stuff, that isn't going to work. What we need is a serious cleansing of the soul that is going to be a prolonged process. In fact, it'll be happening our entire lives. So, this is what James is talking about. This is one of the goals of discipleship in James, is to teach us to love our neighbors as ourselves. We will not enjoy Christ and our lives and others like we can if we're selfish and not loving of others. And so there are 5 things that mess with our love for others. 2 things that mess with our love for God: trials, temptation. 5 things that can mess with our love for others. We've talked about them. We looked at judgmentalism last night. Callousness towards others' needs. That's the latter half of chapter 2. We're going to look now at the tongue. Then there's bitter jealousy and selfish ambition tangled together in chapter 3, 13 through 18, that make for a really problematic person. And then there's covetousness, James chapter 4, 1 through 5. So those are the 5 things that mess with our love for others. And trust me, and you trust James, trust Jesus, you want to love others. It is God's goal. This is what he desires. It's what he is returning this earth to. I mean, when the new earth is created, there will be absolute peace and harmony on the new earth. And God is working our way back toward that. The absence of evil and of sin. So this is always best. It's best for others. It's certainly on the thing that glorifies and honors God, but it's also best for us. We will enjoy life much more if we understand and practice this. So, why is having a clean soul the key to loving our neighbors as ourselves? 4 reasons. Number 1, in verses 1 and 2, because a clean soul allows a teacher, and I put teacher here because that's the word James used, but we could insert preacher there too, allows a teacher or a preacher to bless rather than to hurt others. with their teaching or their speech. Second, because a clean soul allows the tongue to make a big difference, a very positive, good difference. Chapter 3, verses 3 through 5a. There are 4 reasons why cleansing the soul is important. The third one is because a clean soul will not destroy the course of our lives. A soul that isn't being purified, but is really deeply struggling, that once you see James's description of what that looks like in real life, because he's right there on the pavement. I mean, his shoes on the pavement. He's very practical. So when you see and understand what he's saying, you're like, this is real life. You're like, oh, I know someone like that. Oh, yeah. Oh, I know someone like that. Not that we're harsh or critical or judgmental of them, right? I mean, oh, yeah, I know someone like that. No, that's exactly the opposite of how we should respond. I know someone like that. Lord, I'm going to pray for them. Help me to help them. That's okay. So that's the third point, verses 5 through 8. And then the fourth reason why it's important to have a clean soul is because a clean soul will allow our words about God and others to match. So let's go back to James, chapter 3, verse 1. I'm opening an app here for a reason, so just 1 second. All right, there we go. James 3, verse 1. My brethren, be not many masters. Now that word masters there is often teachers. Can be translated either way. But I think in the context of the tongue, the idea of a master, this is more of the medieval word for a teacher. Does that make sense? So, we still have this idea. You get your master's degree. What does that mean? You're now able to teach. Okay, that's the idea. So, my brethren, be not many masters or teachers. In other words, don't be just like chomping at the bit to get up in the pulpit. Okay? It's a natural thing for many to want to have the face time, the recognition, the prestige that comes with teaching Sunday school or preaching for the church. And James is warning people here in verse 1, all this is about the tongue, or more specifically, really, about their souls. But he's warning men in general, be careful not to just jump at an opportunity to teach if one presents itself, or even to force your way into such an opportunity, because you may not be ready. Your soul may not be ready. And if your soul's not ready, you're going to hurt people with your tongue. That's what's going on here. All right, so be not many masters, teachers, knowing that we, the teachers, we shall receive the greater condemnation. In other words, God is going to be very strict when he's going through the books. You understand, the book of life? If your name's not written in the book of life, you will not go to heaven. But if your name is written in the book of life, then we will stand before Christ at what's called the Bema Seat judgment, and then we will be judged out of the books. So the books are records of what we've done in our lives. Okay, so we're not gonna experience harm. Christ has saved us, so there's not gonna be any harm, but there will be a lack of reward, depending. And so there will be a strict judgment of those teachers, those who teach, okay, for how they've used that grand opportunity afforded them by the Lord. So that's verse 1. Now verse 2. For in many things we offend all. In many ways we are all offending. So in other translations, you'll see something like like this. For we all stumble in many ways, offend or stumble. What James is saying is nobody's perfect. He's arguing right from the get-go here. We know that we are all still in that Galatians 5 flesh against the spirit battle. When we are step in step with the Spirit, that's later in chapter 5 of Galatians, then the Spirit will be advancing on the flesh. But if we're not step in step with the Spirit, then what will be happening in our souls? The flesh will be advancing on the Spirit. That's what he's saying in Galatians 5. Paul is. Okay, so back to James here. James is just admitting right off the bat, and this is really important for what he's going to say, because he's kind of introducing this part on the tongue. Hey, we all struggle with various things that we do, sinning in various ways. If any man offend not in word, the same is a perfect man, and able also to bridle the whole body. All right, so I'm pausing for a second to let that sink in. What does that sound like to you? So he says, in many things we all offend. And then he immediately in the very next line says, if any man offend not in word, the same is a perfect man. So is there a contradiction here? Well, there might be in our minds, but there's not in the Bible. Okay, so, whoa, James, you just said that we all struggle, and then you're saying that some can be perfect? I thought you just said, we all struggle. Which way is it? Aha! Now we come to our word again. This is the word we've been talking about. All right, this is that word, Teleios. So what did we say? I think it was Sunday morning. Maybe it was even last night. What did we say about Teleios? It never, not once, not ever in the Bible, nor even outside of the Bible in books that we still have, never does it mean sinless perfection. It literally cannot mean that. So James is not contradicting himself here. That might be what we are thinking in our minds because of the English meaning of the word perfect. We might be thinking James is saying sinless perfection, but that word never means that in Greek. So what James is saying is this. There are men who should be teachers. Okay, back to verse 1. Yes, they are not perfect men. So if you're going to try to find, if you want your pastor to be perfect, then I don't know about you, but I'm checking out and I'm going home because I'm done for. If we are expecting our pastors to never make any mistakes or never sin, that you'll never have a shepherd in a church. However, what is he also saying here? He's creating the proper expectation that's going to now drive us down through the rest of the verses. There are men, though, if any man does not offend in word, the same as a Teleios man, not a sinlessly perfect man, a Teleios man, a man whose soul is whole. Perfectly whole, no one, well, Christ's was. Ours is not. We do not have, no human being has a soul that is perfectly Teleios. But there are men, and by the way, women. It's just that in this context, he's talking about preaching in a church. Okay, so women are included in that part of the discussion. But no man is going to be free of stumbling, and yet there are some men who are not normally anyway going to offend in word. Those are the men who are Teleios in their soul that you want up in the pulpit. Okay, so if there's a man in a church and he's kind of a troublemaker, but he's like a good teacher, You know what I'm saying? I mean, I don't think that's anybody here. I'm just saying, there are people like that where they're kind of troublemakers. Maybe they have an agenda. They have some particular thing that they want to drive, and this is what I champion. It's like not even really what the church is about, or okay. Do you want to put a man like that? You know what a man like, what's going on in the soul of a man like that? The exact opposite of teleosity. It's called pride. It's called, selfish. And well, James says it in the latter half of chapter 3. This is bitter jealousy and selfish ambition, wanting position and prestige and pride and my way. And so if you know somebody who's kind of like that, or very much like that, don't ever let them take the sacred desk, because they will offend a lot in word, and they'll hurt people, not help. James is trying to set the stage for, hey, we're looking for men who will help the church, who won't hurt the church. So, what do we know about this Teleios man? That his soul is like what we've described earlier in the sermon of James. His soul is, he loves the Lord with his whole soul. He loves his neighbor. He wants the best for the people. Not just the people in church, but even people in town. He's constantly trying to show them the love of Christ. This is his goal. This is who he is at his core. Well, what do you know then about that kind of a man? This is interesting. So the logic here is powerful. What do you know about that kind of a man who is Teleios? Well, if there's a man like that who is not destroying people with his speech, hurting people, what do you also know about him? That means almost certainly he's able to bridle the whole body. And the whole body, everything else about him is going to be in order. And maybe he doesn't make the bed. I don't think we're talking about like all kinds of like super neat, like a neatness free. That's not even what James is talking about there. It means that he's not going to be grievously sinning in other ways with other body parts. I think is probably the idea when he says whole body, but I think it's much broader than that with his soul. The other ways, he's not going to be deeply offensive in other ways either. So, a clean soul will allow a teacher to bless rather than hurt others. And this is the kind of man we want. Let's keep going. Why do we want? Why is the goal of discipleship to have a clean soul? So that their words will be pure. Why is that so important? Why is it key to loving our neighbors as ourselves? The second reason is because a clean soul allows the tongue to make a big difference. And that's a positive difference. It can make a big difference in a negative way too, but James doesn't turn negative until the middle of verse 5. Right now, he's still talking about the incredible blessing that a pastor or an evangelist or a missionary, or whoever it might be, that a man of God can be by their speech. Verse 3. So I don't know if I like being illustrated by a horse. No, I'm just teasing. I like it. So they're talking. James is like, okay, here's a teacher. And then he jumps right into horse. I'm like, thanks, James. All right. So behold, we put bits in the horses' mouths that they may obey us, and we turn about their whole body. So by means of a little, today it would not be leather usually, but metal. Back then it would probably be leather, but today we put a metal bit into the mouth. So it's going to go back into the mouth of the horse. right? There's going to be a bridle that connects that bit to the reins that the rider uses to control the horse. Okay, so why is that bit important? Because by just gently pulling on the reins, there's English, different types of riding and rein control, but by pulling on the reins just gently, that horse feels the pull and knows which way you want to go. Or if the horse isn't doing what you want, now you don't pull too hard, but three pulls and whoa, and the horse supposed to slow down or stop or whatever it might be doing that's wrong. That bit, in other words, though it is small, allows the rider to control that big old animal. Now, that's the way it's supposed to work. I'm from a city. We didn't grow up with horses. We grew up riding bicycles where I grew up, okay? 280,000 people in the city area where I grew up. So I'm already at Northland Baptist Bible College as a teacher. Four of us flew out to the Wind River Range of the Rocky Mountains in Wyoming. And I preached in a church there. We did some ministry. And then the pastor and another one of the men rode us up into the Wind River Range. So the snow is still slightly on the ground. It was cool. It was beautiful. I never ride horses. I had one time ridden a horse for a couple minutes. That's it. So I'm like, okay, this will be fun. And they give me of course they had there were 8 of us, I think, total. And so they give me my horse. You want to know what the name of my horse was? Sarge. Had me wondering from the get-go, right? Why would you name a horse Sarge? Because he wants to be in charge, right? So here's Sarge, so I get on Sarge, and I'm like, I can't even hardly get on the horse. I'm trying to figure out how the stirrups work, and I get up there. Sorry, for those of you who are horse riders, you can just laugh all you want and judge me. You're allowed to judge me. This is the one time where you could judge me. If you were here last night, that's, at least it's supposed to be a laugh. Okay, so thank you, got one. So here I am getting on the horse. It's a 2-hour ride up to our campground, so I'm a bit sore, not too bad, but we get off, we unpack, we get a tent set up, all this cooking stuff. So the next morning we're going riding to fish in a lake that no one ever fishes in. And it's way up in the tops of the mountains. So we go another 2-hour ride to get to this lake, and however many, I think there were 6 or 8 of us fishing. Yeah, there were 6 of us. I know there were 6 of us fishing. 6 of us caught 22 fish in an hour, maybe it was even less than an hour. We were throwing back the smaller ones. It was crazy. Throw a line in, it was fun. Okay, so we get these incredible trout of different types, and we kind of pack them, and we get back on our horses to return, and we're on, the lake's here, the mountain side is here, and it's kind of rounded, and our horses are up here. And then there's this long valley with no trees, and then way off in the distance goes back up into another mountain, and you can see the tree line. I'm telling you this for a reason. So 3 of the men decided to go forward and get some pre-stuff done to start preparing for the fish. So 3 of the men get on their horses and take off. The other 3 of us, packing the fish, getting ready to get on our horses. So again, I'm such a novice. They are helping, the other 2 guys are helping me get on to Sarge, because this is even on a mountainside, and that made it even harder. Finally get on Sarge, and he is so restless. He's never been like this before. He's just, I'm like, whoa, buddy, slow, stop it. And the other 2 are about ready to get on their horses, and all of a sudden, it's kind of like a cartoon, but it was real. He just takes off on me, and he's running at full speed gallop. I found out his girlfriend was was one of the horses in the lead pack. I'm pretty sure that's why. Anyway, I'm like, oh. So I did exactly what they said. Don't pull too hard and yell whoa. Now, I think I hit 1 on the Richter scale. The mountains were reverberating with my whoa. It was so loud. But I did the 3 jerks and I said whoa, and Sarge didn't pay any attention to me at all. They said that the only thing I messed up was I should have been waving my arm, and then I would have been I would have gotten the blue ribbon in the rodeo. Somehow I didn't fall off. So I got up there and I didn't die. Okay. That little bit is supposed to control the horse. Doesn't mean it always does. Now, in James here in the illustration, he's assuming that you're not writing Sarge, okay? So here what he's saying is that little bit controls the whole animal. And his point embedded in this section on the tongue is that this little piece of flesh, it's like 2 pounds-ish, that little piece of flesh in our mouths, in a way, it controls so much of our lives. It's small, but boy, does it wield great power. Now, he hasn't turned negative yet. He's still, in this part, thinking positively. In other words, the benefit of a controlled tongue, wow, it can do some great, it can make a big difference. Verse 4. Behold, also the ships, which though they were so great, how big were the ships back in James's day? I mean, there were ships that could carry more than 400 passengers and a huge amount of cargo in the hold. Even today, that's a big ship. So there were some very large vessels back then. Even which, though they were so great and are driven by fierce winds, yet are they turned about with a very small helm, whithersoever the governor listeth, the pilot of the ship desires. Okay, so even though this is a big ship with sails, and even though it's being buffeted by the wind to go the wrong direction, the pilot, the guy who's at the wheel, or maybe at the rudder, probably in these ships it's going to be wheel. The guy who's at the wheel, he's controlling a piece of wood. You know, I've seen pictures of some of these for the bigger ships. You know, they're about 8-9 feet high, and then, you know, they kind of taper down and they come out like this. So if you can imagine a rudder like this, but I mean, it's sailing a ship about the size of this building roughly, if you tapered the building. That's a lot. That little thing is driving this whole great big ship? Yeah. Even if it's against fierce winds? So, do you want a rudder? Is a rudder doing something good? Absolutely, because you're not going to get to Alexandria, Egypt from Greece unless you've got a rudder. You're not going to get, in other words, where you're going without that rudder. So a rudder's a good thing, a bit in a horse's mouth is a good thing, but in both cases, they're small in comparison to what they're driving. As the tongue is a small part of our body, and yet, what does verse 5 say? The tongue is a little member, and yet it boasteth great things. Great things. Good things. Don't think bad things here. Not yet. Great things. A godly preacher or teacher, or if it's a lady doing a ladies' ministry, godly men and women can be used of the Lord to bless. A godly father in a home will change the lives of those children forever. Godly mother, same thing. A godly husband will, what he says in his marriage with his wife will it'll either make the home or like a wave of the sea. Which do you want? In our lives, what do we want? I think the choices as believers is so stark, it's so clear. I don't want all that. I want what God wants for me. That's what's best. And to have that means I need to love my neighbor and I need to love the Lord with my whole Teleios soul. So this is the good part about the tongue. Don't assume that everybody has to have a bad tongue, because when we get to the second half of this chapter, it's so hard. You might be like, whoa, I don't know. Does anybody? Yes, many, many, many people have grown in Christ by grace, been changed slowly by the Spirit over time, that their tongues are a blessing. Now, let's go to the third point. Why is having a clean soul the key to loving our neighbors as ourselves? There are 4 reasons. We've looked at the first 2 that are both positive. Now, let's look at the third reason. And unfortunately, it's not positive. It's quite harsh. Because a clean soul will not destroy. Why do we want a clean soul? Because a clean soul won't destroy the course of our lives. Look at the middle of verse 5. Behold, how great a matter a little fire kindleth. And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. So is the tongue among our members. So here's the way a non-Teleios person lives. This is now a description of someone whose soul is in the process of being cleansed but hasn't gotten very far. And that might not mean that they're only 1 year old in the Lord. They might be 40 years or 50 years old in the Lord and still have a rather, corrupt soul. I know people like that. There are people right now in my head that I can see their faces right now. And, and I love them and I want better for them. It's like, it seems like you can't get through. Okay? So, why won't they listen? Why don't they hear? Why are they hearers only, not doers? I don't know. I kind of do. I do. I guess I do know. But it's frustrating, right? When we love people and we're trying to see them grow and they're not growing much. And their tongues are telling on them. And their tongues are just hurting themselves and they're hurting other people and it just doesn't stop. And they're part of a church and it's like, man, do you do church discipline? Well, it's never quite like that. It's just like that. This is how sometimes things are. Well, you pray that God's word will keep working in their lives. So, behold, how great a matter a little fire kindleth. How much of a fire does it take to burn down a forest? A little fire, a little spark. One lightning strike, for example, or one, floaty. When you're doing a campfire and one of the leaves does one of these. One little floaty that lands in a pile of dry leaves over there. Or one big, humongous, tens of thousands of acres. And one lightning strike can just, snap off a tree. It doesn't start a fire, but it does maybe just start a little spark that then becomes a great conflagration. My dad he studied math in college. And every summer, to make money, he would go out from Iowa to the state of Oregon. And he was a forest ranger. He loved that job. Man. So they would break trails and break springs. Open up springs and cut trails. He loved that nature in those mountains and all that. So one of the other things that he had to do as a forest ranger was, fight fires. So he had a lot of training on firefighting. And one time there was a rather big fire. Now, if you don't know this, many probably do, but fires go faster in a stiff wind than we can run. Because a fire can hit 30 miles an hour even faster. No Olympic athlete can outrun a fire if the wind changes and it's heavy. It will run you down. So my dad, all of the men who were in the firefighting crews wore a walkie-talkie on their belts. And there was a signal. I don't know what it was, like a warning kind of sound. And if they were told, if you ever hear that sound, they had different sounds, but if you ever hear this sound, that means the wind has changed and you need to immediately bury yourself because that fire's doubling back on you. Only once did it happen to my dad when that sound came across. So he's like, whoa, and they were making a break. Do you know what I mean by a break? In other words, you cut down all the trees and then you get rid of the brush so that if the fire comes this way, it burns up to the break, but then because there are no trees or dry brush, it can't get over here. So the fire literally stops and then you protect the forest. So he's with a huge amount of guys, they're doing this break. Whatever. My dad said he immediately upon hearing that, heart rate goes up, right? Adrenaline kicks in. He's like digging in the dirt. And he said he got himself down in the dirt, covered himself, because this is what they were taught to do, just leave a little breathing hole. Covered himself in dirt. He said no sooner had he gotten himself covered in, it was like the sound of a freight train rolling over the top of him. They didn't have the break finished, so it just right over the top. He said it was so hot he felt like a baked potato in an oven. He was just getting cooked, but he didn't die. It didn't kill him. Didn't hurt him really. He was breathing a lot of smoke for a while because he stayed down there quite a bit under the dirt, but he was fine. Now he told me, and I think I'm right on this. I don't think this was a campfire. I think it was a lightning strike. It might have been the opposite. But anyway, he said that this thing was started by just something real small. All the fires are started, for the most part. They're started unintentionally by just a small little spark. Campfire that just got out of control. Something like that. And huge swaths of forest will be burned out. Welcome to the first description of the tongue when the soul is corrupt. There it is. Show me a Christian who complains and gripes, grumbling, crude talk. Oh, that person's so ugly. Wow, they are so fat. Good night. Look at that. Oh, those drivers are all idiots. Oh, that referee in the sports yelling at the TV all the time. Oh, these referees are so horrible. Okay, maybe I'm hamming it up a little too much, but belittling talk. People who look down and talk down to other people. Harsh talk. Maybe husbands to wives or fathers to children. Hurting words. Arguments. Yelling. Cruel comments. Right, we could just keep going on and on with things like this. There are Christians, I believe they're saved. There's always a possibility they're not, but I believe a lot of these people who, they just don't seem to see it or understand that there's deep corruption yet. The old and new natures are both there, but they aren't growing much. A little, yes, but not a lot. And it seems like the whole area all around them is like burned out. I'll be kind of careful here. Is this going live accessible to people? Okay, better not. All right, I've got an illustration, but I better not do that one. I don't think you'd ever see it, but there's a man that I know, and if I described him, you'd be like, okay, I know someone like that, but just in case it could get back to him, I better not. All right, so 5. How great a matter a little fire kindleth. Verse 6, the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. The tongue is like it's potentially just like all the sins of the whole world. The tongue is just full of sin, like it's swollen with sin. A world of iniquity. So is the tongue among our members. How so? That it defileth the whole body, Defileth there is often our word to stain something. And so here's what here's another illustration, another of the negative illustrations on how the tongue shouldn't be, but often is. So his illustration, if you read it carefully, look at it carefully and think about it, it defiles the whole body, it stains the whole body. What he's describing is the tongue staining us. It's as if, I would never do this, but it's as if I would take, the inkwells that they used to have in like class, you dip the pen and it fills it up with ink. Okay, take one of those little inkwells and, put it all in your mouth. Okay, so this is the idea. Literally the tongue, as you're talking, it's just dripping ink down you. It's staining. Obviously, he's not talking about ink here. He's saying that the words that are coming out of our mouths are making spiritual stains on all of us. It's like you'd see somebody who did have stains all over their clothes. Well, this is stains all over their soul. But it's staining everything, themselves and everything around them. Their words are doing that. What else is it doing? What's the next illustration? And setteth on fire the course of nature. The course of the nature of his life. So I'll try to stay within the camera range. Okay, so here's what James is saying. As a person is walking down the course of his life, he's talking. And what is his tongue doing? It's as if it's belching out napalm. Read it again. Conversations that the person's having it might be gossip, it might be criticism, it might be, brutal talk or, evil discussions. Just everywhere they go, burning things with their speech, hurting people, destroying relationships. This is possible. In fact, it's more than possible. It's unfortunately common. So, a person whose soul is still in the process of growth and yet still kind of corrupt can do a lot of fire damage to the course of their lives. And the tongue, their tongue, where's the source of the fire? It's set on fire of hell. Ultimately, where does this kind of stuff comes from below, not from above? That's chapter 3, verses 13 through 18. The source is not a good one. Okay, verse 7. This is interesting. Talk about controlling the tongue. In verse 7, we can control animals. James, again, he's just full of illustrations. This whole section is almost all illustration. For every kind of beast, and of birds, and of serpents, and of things in the sea, is tamed, and hath been tamed of mankind. We've probably all seen, some man who's tamed a grizzly bear and lives with him, has him outside and gives him hugs. And we've probably all seen, the SeaWorld killer whales and how or the dolphins that are there, whatever. When I was in grad school, I had a friend, he's a missionary to Russia. His name's Kevin. Did you know Kevin Jones? No, okay. So Kevin and I were like in an apartment not very far from each other, and I would marvel at Kevin. He had a bird. He also had a snake, but I'm not into snakes. Anyway, he had a bird, and he would take that bird out of its cage, and he had trained the bird. He had potty trained the bird. So he'd have the bird on his shoulder, be walking out, and then anytime he wanted, he could basically bring that bird over to the trash can and tell it to go to the bathroom, and it would. And I'm just like, how did you train the bird to do that? Okay. We can train animals. Have you ever read the one? True story. South Africa, a man in a war had lost both of his arms. Do you know this one? This is true. And he was the guy who did the switches before it was you didn't just put, the train engine didn't just hit a button and then the switch moved, to go on this track versus that track. You had to do it manually. So, but if you don't have arms, you can't do it. You know what he did? He trained a monkey. Seriously, you can look it up, to pull the switches for him. He'd tell him what to do, the monkey would do it. I don't know what kind of treats he gave him, but they were probably a lot like the things in the other room. Hey, by the way, free treats for anybody who, okay. I'm trying to help you there, Pastor. Thank you. We'll give a whole bunch to anybody whose birthday it might be today. We could give 3 boxes to, don't you think? Yeah, get rid of some. Okay. So we can tame like every kind of even creatures you wouldn't think could be tamed, like a cobra, snake. They can kind of tame them. All right. These have all been tamed by mankind. But, verse 8, this is one of those conjunctions you don't like. But the tongue can no man tame. It is an unruly evil. So when I think of an unruly animal, I'm thinking of a lion that isn't happy that it's pent up in a cage at a circus. And it's walking, prowling behind the bars. It's like the tongue is behind the teeth, almost like the teeth are behind, it's prowling, looking for trouble, just looking for something to attack. Not only can the tongue be an unruly evil, but it is, look at the next illustration, full of deadly poison. I like to call this verbal venom. Deadly poison. It's like the snake that latches on, bites you, and then I've never been bitten by any snakes. I've held a couple. I don't know why I did it, but anyway, held a couple at like zoos or whatever. I don't like snakes. I'm not too afraid of them, but I just don't care for them. And yet I've seen at the Soho Zoo in North Carolina, I saw one of the experts with the snake. She was holding the snake. It was wrapped around her arm. And there's like a crowd of maybe 30 people watching her, and she's talking about the snake, and all of a sudden the snake goes on her arm. And I mean, her flesh is like pulled up. And the snake has got a hold, and she called it some kind of snake that doesn't normally let go. Like it's one that kind of like holds. And, we're all just like, now fortunately it wasn't poisonous, but we're all like, oh. And somebody in the crowd whispered to, I think it was my wife and then to me, did you see the boy grab the tail of that snake and did that? We couldn't see it from our angle, but evidently a little boy had come up and wrenched the tail of the snake, and that's what bit. But think if that had been poisonous, she would have had to very quickly, right, get that taken care of. That's what our tongues can be like. Instead of it being, fleshy matter, it can kind of be like the cartilage, I think is what the fang is made out of, like the cartilage tubes that are kind of like fangs or teeth, go through the epidermal layer of the skin and then inject the poison right into the bloodstream. That's what our words, our verbal venom can do to people. Whoosh, really hurt them, poison them. So look at all the illustrations. They're positive ones, and then look at the negative ones. Fire, world of iniquity, just like a tongue swollen with sinful issues. It stains the whole body. It sets the whole course of our lives on fire. It can. I mean, it is an unruly evil, like a lion pent up behind the bars that just wants out. And then it's full of deadly poison, of verbal venom. I don't want a tongue like that. And I know you don't either. Now, the last thing I want to do is be the preacher who's like up here going, boom, 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 you got to fix your speech. Frankly, that's not it. I mean, it is, yes, okay, on a very surface level, fixing our speech is the point kind of, but really, that's never going to fix the problem. Trying to control the speech is just completely the opposite of what James is talking about. What is he talking about then? That's the final section, the last 4 verses. So there are 4 reasons why having a clean soul is the key to loving our neighbors as ourselves. We want to love our neighbors. This glorifies God. This grows the kingdom. In other words, people will be saved and come into the church and one day be in the eternal kingdom. There's so much good that happens when our souls are clean. But you know what? There's even benefit to us, because what happens when we love our neighbors, then we're not griping and complaining about them. We're not harsh, and it's not messing with our minds and our souls. When we're negative toward our neighbors, we're going to be like this. But when we just like, you know what, man, I hope that guy who moved the marker and took some of my land, I'll one day be able to share. Can I actually say this? Literally, one of the 2 times that happened, the man is now a born-again Christian. Okay? I wonder, would he be? Of course, God's in control. All right, he would be. But I'm just saying, all right. Look at verses 9 through 12. A clean soul. 4th reason why this is so important. Because a clean soul will allow our words about God and others to match. So what is a hypocrite? What is a Pharisee? They're the opposite of a follower, as Jesus would define it. What is a follower of Christ? Do we remember back? I'm sure we do. To Matthew chapter 5, Sermon on the Mount, verse 20. If your righteousness does not exceed that of the Pharisees, then you're not my follower. Okay? Well, the Pharisees are all about external righteousness. What they lack is internal righteousness. It's all about the outside. There's nothing going on the inside. No genuine Christian is going to be like that entirely. But we know, and I'm not trying to be harsh, we know people who we think are almost certainly Christians, but who really kind of, seems like there's a disconnect, right? And we don't want that. Well, when there's a disconnect, when they put on the smile on the outside, on Sunday morning, but the husband and wife have been yelling at each other the whole way toward church, and the kids in the station wagon or whatever, the minivan, or they're like, they're coming to church like this, because the parents have been arguing, and then, you drive into the parking lot, and all of a sudden, smile, kids. I've never done this, seriously. I don't think I ever will. But, husband and wife come in, and you think that, wow, what a perfect family. There's a man in our church who came the second year that I was at the church, and he calls Facebook, you know what he calls it? Fake book. Because he says that he knows too many people who put the smiley everything, on the what do you call I don't know, the circle of the profile picture. I don't know what the circle's called. Anyway, the circle and then the main profile. He said, you see all these, and he said, I know way too many people that it ain't like that. We don't want to be fake book, we want to be this. But when can you normally tell when a person's really got a big pocket of us in their soul that's not draining very fast? They're believers, but it's not draining as fast as it should be. How do you know that? Well, here's how you know it. You're not usually going to know it by what they say about God. Because rarely, and I've had it happen, but rarely will a Christian say bad things about the Lord. That is very rare. Not never, but really rare. I mean, like really rare. I don't know very many people that I've worked with who have said something negative about God. Now, they've corrected their lives in time, but, very rare. But you know what is also very common is the opposite. Some people will say lots of negative things about other people. So if you look at verse 9, this is precisely what James is saying, but the depth of his point is going to be made clear, not in the first 8 verses, because they're building up to it. Now the depth of the point is verses 9 through 12. Thing is, a lot of people look, the illustrations of verses 1, especially 2 through 8, are so intriguing, we get stuck there, and then we kind of read over quickly verses 9 through 12 and miss that this really is the crux. So verse 9. Therewith, with the tongue, therewith bless we God, even the Father, and therewith curse we men, which are made after the similitude of God, in the likeness of God. Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 and 27 and 28, we're made in the image of God. What? How can a tongue bless God, and when it says curse men, it doesn't mean with curse words. I mean, that obviously it could be that egregious, but just saying negative things about others is the point. So how can we say only good about God and yet be so negative about others who are made in the image of God? This is one of the reasons why early on Sunday morning I said that for me, chapter 1 is a whole lot easier than chapters 2 through 4. Loving God is way easier than loving the neighbor. It's right here. So, verse 10. Out of the same mouth proceedeth blessing and cursing. My brethren. Okay, is whether they're saved or not a part of this discussion? No. He's talking to Christians, and he's doing it all the way through the book except for chapter 2, verses 14 through 26, where there legitimately is the possibility that you are so egregiously a sinner that you're not even a believer. Okay, so in that section, yes, but in the rest of the book, he's assuming that the people who are reading his book are Christians in here. Once again, he reminds us that. I think he keeps putting brethren in there to make sure that the readers are not questioning that. Because why else would he say it so often? So, we bless God and curse men. Out of the same mouth proceedeth blessing and cursing. My brethren, Christians, brothers and sisters, these things ought not so to be. And then he goes to nature. Doth a fountain send forth at the same place sweet water? We talked about this verse at the beginning, that glucose water. Glucose is the Greek word. So does a fountain send forth at the same place sweet water and bitter? No. Can the fig tree, my brethren, here he does it again, like twice, brethren. Can the fig tree bear olives? No. Either a vine figs? No. So can no fountain, and literally in Greek that's salt thing, so fountain is like salt, yield both salt water and fresh. It doesn't happen. And that's it. That's all we have on the tongue. Then we move into the next section, which we won't do tonight. In fact, we aren't going to do it at all. Verses 13 through 18 are the fourth of 5 sin issues with our neighbor. So we finished this section on the tongue, and I'm not quite finished yet with the message almost, but we finish this section, we read these last few verses, and I wonder if as we read them, our minds go a little numb, and we're just like, okay. So what is James saying here? He's saying that a fig tree is always going to produce figs, a grapevine's always going to produce grapes. Then shouldn't a Christian soul always produce sweet speech? Yeah, it should. Why doesn't it? Well, because what does he say in chapter 1, verse 8? And what does he also say in chapter 4, verse 8? Sometimes we are double Dipsukos is the Greek word. Di, double, two, and then psukos. Sometimes we are double-souled. So if we're double-souled, it's weird. It's not natural, James is saying, for the soul to be double like that and to be able to produce two very different things out of the same source. Shouldn't be like that. In nature, it isn't like that. But because of the redeeming, what's going on in the redemption of the soul, unfortunately for us believers, it is like that. So again, what is the crux here as we end? What's the point? The point is this. It's about the source. The source and its fruit will match. Please catch this, because I think this can be missed pretty easily when we read these 4 verses. James is using from nature the source and its fruit match. Okay, you don't get olives from a fig tree. Okay, so the fruit and its source will match. And you say, well, didn't you just say, well, the fruit of the soul doesn't matter? No, I didn't actually say that. If you listen carefully, I didn't say that. Catch this. I know it's going to take me a little bit to fully develop it, but please catch it. The source and its fruit match. The fruit will tell you what its source looks like. So if I see a fig, I know it didn't come from a grapevine. Okay? If I see an apple, I know it didn't come from an orange tree. Duh. Very easy. Okay. The source and its fruit will match. So, what do we know then? What's the main point? It's not about fruit. It's not about fresh water and salt water. His point is that our tongues will tell on us. They're going to tell how mature we are. Our speech is the product of the source. And so what our speech is going to tell us what's going on in the source. It'll tell us how clean or lack thereof the soul really is. So listen to what someone says, and that'll tell you how needy they are. Okay? Your tongue reveals the condition of your soul, its source. So if there's a person I know, my son, I'm going to be so generic, so I know this person's never. I'm not even going to say if it's male or female. I'll try not to. But my son, this was years ago, at one of the churches I was pastoring, came up to me at home when we first got home after church on Sunday, and he said, "Dad, do you think so-and-so is saved?" And it took me aback. I mean, this was a person who was kind of considered, not by me, but considered by many a pillar of the church. He'd kind of grown up in the church. And this person was at this point probably about 70. And so he's like, "Dad, do you think this person is saved?" And he was genuinely asking this. He wasn't being harsh. And I mean, I stopped and I'm trying to think, like, why would he even ask such a thing? So I'm asking him, what do you mean, bud? He said, "Well, this person, I don't think I've ever heard this person say anything positive." And then, my mind is like racing back over years of conversation, trying to think, have I ever heard this person ever say anything positive? And I don't think I really can. Kind of almost a little bit, sometimes like at Christmas, a little bit, almost not. And I then, as this person's shepherd, I started like being more and more, I'm like, why didn't I see that? The concern in my soul for this individual kept growing. I'm like, okay, whoa. And so in my mind, I'm even wondering, like even today, is that person even a believer? And I'm serious about this. This isn't meant to be harsh. I love this person. I'm concerned about this person. is that this person, I have never really heard this person ever say anything good, positive, or nice. It's just constant griping and complaining, and I really do wonder. Now, I've preached many challenges about making sure of your salvation. So it's like I don't feel like I'm, in any kind of guilt as a pastor shepherd before the Lord on the judgment day for not preaching the whole truth. I have. I hope I have. I think I have. But I think in this person's case, there is a question, in my mind anyway, and I'm not being judgmental, only the Lord knows for sure. But here's an example of a person who's been in church that person's entire life from when they were a baby to they're still in the church. I don't know, that person's probably about 75 now, maybe. I'm just kind of guessing. I still have not heard that person ever say anything truly beneficial to anyone else. Fortunately, that person's never taught. Okay, so there's some good things there, in other words, protective things for the church, but there's like genuine concern. That's like one of the worst examples of like far over here. Most people who are in churches, can you see what I'm doing now? Not everybody's looking up. I mean, there's this whole spectrum. It's like a ruler with all the little notches on it. There's a whole spectrum of growth from not very mature, even if they've been in the church for a long time, to very Teleios. And some people are Teleios rather rapidly. I have a man in mind who I think in 3 years is one of the more godly individuals I know. Okay? And that is not a very long period of time. He is older, and he got saved older, quite a bit older. He was probably about late 60s when he got saved. So, I mean, really rapid growth, and he's had a lot of help in growth from his family especially. And then there are people who, for a long time. So, gently, can I just ask you, I'm not trying to, no guilt trips, no arm behind the back, I'm care about all of you. So where are you? Don't look around and don't be thinking, yeah, man, I'm glad he came tonight and preached that because someone else, watching or maybe even sitting here, they needed that. Oh, no. Where are we? Think about your speech over the last, let's say, 6 months. What marks your speech? What does it look like to close? And literally, I'm closing. I'm turning to Philippians chapter 2. We were actually talking about this verse at lunch, so it's fresh in my mind. Philippians 2, verses 12 and 13 is it probably is the most, it's certainly one of the top few of the most profound verses on sanctification in the Bible. What Paul says here to the Philippians is incredible. So I won't go through it all. I'm not going to exposit it because I do want to end this sermon. But after giving one of the greatest theological explanations of sanctification found anywhere in the whole 66-book Bible, what comes next? And this is, I preached through years ago, preached through Philippians. So when I saw this, I was like, wow, duh, okay. What comes immediately after this double-fisted, power-packed definition of sanctification? Look at verse 14, chapter 2, Philippians. Do all things without murmurings and disputings. Man, that proverbial light bulb went on when I saw it. It's like, now it didn't just go on, it was like flashing. Like the lighthouse light, just beam. Like, oh yeah, of course. That's why that's there. It seems out of place. Like, why sanctification? And then he says right after that, do all things without murmuring. Because what he's saying is, what's the hardest thing in sanctification? What is the hard? I don't know if it's the hardest, because he doesn't actually say the hardest, but I think that's the implication here. One of, if not the hardest things in sanctification is to walk through life in a Teleios way, which means we're not just constantly little murmurings and grumblings. The weather. I bet you are, Just little things. All right. Okay. That's what Paul's saying here. And I mean, it could be bigger things too. I mean, with speech, but I think his point is minor little speech adjustments are the hardest. That's like one of the last things, as you're growing in Christ, this is one of the last things that's going to be repaired, perfectly repaired. Okay, none of us is going to be there until heaven, right? But I mean, when you see someone who isn't griping and complaining about small things, like literally they're already to that point where it's not guaranteed, but either they're very quiet people who never say anything, or they are people who have grown in Christ to the point where, wow, they really are a good example of the believer. So, the soul is the source of our tongues. If the soul is clean, it will produce sweet words. If the soul is dark, it will produce evil words, hurtful words. Where is your soul? A corrupt soul will soon reveal itself, because a corrupt soul cannot sustain uplifting speech for very long. Okay? I mean, somebody might try for a little while to just keep their speech positive, but a corrupt soul cannot maintain that for very long. But a healthy soul may say a few bad things from time to time, James chapter 3, verse 2, for proof of that. But a healthy soul cannot sustain evil speech for long. If a person with a healthy soul gets involved in a really negative, this happened, right, to you. You get some, and it's just like the conversation just goes downhill, and it's not good. And pretty soon you start feeling dirty, and you're just like, I just want out of this. I don't want to be a part of this. And you find a way to just excuse yourself. That is true of a healthy soul. So, in the last 6 months, what's come out? I'd say of your mouth, off your tongue, but let's really make it like James does. What has come out of your soul? Where is your soul? We all want a clean soul. We want a soul, because when our soul is clean, our lives are way better. They're not like a wave of the sea driven with the wind and tossed. They're shalom. Perfectly shalom, no, but largely shalom. That's what I want, and I know you do too. Father, give us grace through the power of your word and the Spirit and prayer to be changed. Lord, that change doesn't come without intense study of your word, but not just for academic purposes, Lord. Help us to see that changing so that we learn and obey, hear and do. Do give this dear group of believers wonderful growth spiritually, wherever they are in their walk with you, as they sit here tonight or watch online or will watch the recording. May each person who hears James 3 afresh again be permanently changed, growing and wanting the good life, the life that is the blessed life. Give us a good night as we go home. Help us not to forget. We pray in Christ's name. Amen.